to, I think, two last quick videos before paper 2, 3rd of June. And so what we got, I'm going to quickly go through a cost reconciliation and with an associated 6 marker to it as well. So cost reconciliation, so what we're doing is, in this particular one, a reconciliation of budgeted to actual cost. This is linked to A2 June 2019, question 15.2. I'm not actually going through the variance calculations because time, I just think it would be too long a video and you just want to focus on one key area. So what we've got here with this reconciliation, you've got to work out the budgeted cost and the actual cost, and then with the variances that you've calculated in 15.1, which would be own figure as long as you use them correctly, reconcile between the two. So for budgeted cost, you've got at the top of the, if we have a look here, let's just get higher. So at the top, you've got the budgeted production of 32,000 units, and you've got the budgeted labour and material. You can't add those two together because you're not comparing like with like. You're comparing the cost of production for 30,000 units, which was actual production, to how much we thought that would cost. So what we would do, or what you should do, is add up the material and labour. That gives you 2.8 million, and that will tell you how much it should have cost for 32,000. Divided by 32, times it by the 30,000. That will give you your budgeted production cost for 30,000 units. Then you add or subtract the material and labour variances, and that will then compare to the actual cost of production. And the way you'd work that is it tells you the amount of hours per unit and the cost per hour, it tells you about material per unit and the cost per kilo, and you can work out the actual cost there. And so then, as long as you've calculated your variances correctly, that will balance between the two. If you haven't, just put them in for the variances in, like I say, favourable or adverse. Do you add them? Do you take them away? We'll look through the mark scheme. But if you're going from budgeted to actual, if there's an adverse variance, we're going to add them because that means that any costs are higher. So actual cost of production would have been higher than budgeted, and any favourable would take away because the production would have been cheaper. Just look at the mark scheme. So if you look at the mark scheme, so the first thing you'll notice is what we said about the budgeted cost. So the budgeted cost for 30,000 units is 2,625,000. As they've done, if you have a look here, they've actually added those together to get there. Like I said, you'd have to have divided the original budgeted figures by 32,000. And then times it by 30, which they're the two elements. I don't know why they've done them individually, just do them as a group really. And then the actual cost would be the same as what I said. You're going to get your individual amount of hours per unit, the cost per unit, and go from there. So the actual cost was 2,569,875. The budgeted is 2,625,000. So you actually get a mark for each of those. Sometimes you don't because you're already given the budget or actual. That's quite nice. And then you'll see you only get 1 mark each for the material labour because it's effectively one thing. So you've got a favourable usage and you've got an adverse price. So we're going to add the price, so the 445,500 and the 380,625. You'll need to work out those variances. I'm just giving you those, like I said, for quickness, but we will add the price because it was adverse, deduct the usage because it was favorable. You're getting a mark for doing both of those right, because if you just, effectively if you got a mark for each, you could have really guessed one of them. There's always a 50-50, so it does make sense why they're doing it that way. And then it's the same for the labour rate and efficiency. The figures are 52,500 and 172,500. And if you add and subtract those figures, that balances between the two or reconciles between the two, which is what you're trying to do. Like it says, it's not sufficient to just show favourable or adverse. So show if you're adding or deducting them. Put in brackets if you're deducting them, or a minus, whichever way you prefer it. A budgeted cost of 2.8 million can be awarded. That's if you've got the incorrect usage and efficiency variance. So what that means is where you haven't flexed the materials to actual production levels and you haven't flexed the labour to the amount of hours for actual production as well. So you can also combine the variances and just do them as one. So the net impact of material is 64,875 adverse, so we'd add it. The net impact of labour is 120,000 favourable, so we'd take it away. So you could do that as well. So just a few little bits to consider, but working out how to do the budgeted cost of actual production and the actual cost from there, that's half your marks. But making sure you add or subtract, so many students lose it because they don't do it, and you're not going to get given a layout, so make sure that you can lay out the reconciliation. The next question on this was, the 6 marker was, advise the management whether it's correct in its interpretation of the results. They said that costs are controlled. So sorry, I didn't even put the question up, but it's whether costs are controlled. That's all it was. That's your focus. So they can say overall actual cost is 50,000 less. So yes, we've got to have balance of 6 markers. Just one of these points explained, or a couple of these points explained, then one argument against, one argument for, one argument against, with numbers, and a judgment is enough. Balance, evidence, judgment. That's what you need for a 6 marker. So the arguments for would be that it's overall it's less. We use less kilos of material. We use less labour hours than we thought. However, the balance is we pay £2.20 more per kilo. We pay 50p more per hour in labour. And the size of the variance could be just the fact that the variances, the standards themselves were incorrect. There's always a good shout that we're not really controlling cost well, it's just the standards are wrong in the first place. And so you could argue that materials are better quality, which is why there's less wastage. We're paying more, but there's less wastage. The labour rate may be a high grade of staff, which is why we're so much more efficient. Any relevant points, but make sure you just make a quick judgment at the end. In conclusion, they are controlling their costs well, because in conclusion, they're not, because it doesn't need to be very long, but balance, evidence, judgment, that's how you're going to get there. So if you've got the numbers in there, you've got for and against, you're going to be getting 5 to 6. If you're only arguing for, you've got evidence, the highest you're going to get is 4. Say, I've read lots of excellent 6 markers and can't go higher than 4 because there's no balance. Make sure you're going both ways. Okay, thank you.